The following program is brought to you in part by Nevada Gold Mines. Visit barrick.com. The Oregon-California Trails Association. Visit octa-trails.org. Knowledge Tree Films, a mindfully creative production house. Visit knowledgetreefilms.com.
This mountain pass is a part of the California National Historic Trail. Picture yourself in 1850 journeying along this route. You are 1,000 miles from home, walking alongside hundreds of other immigrants, their animals, and their wagons. On this remarkable trail, you will travel over 1,600 miles across 10 states from Missouri to California. You will face many hardships on your journey: blistering heat, intense thirst, hunger, and disease. Over 250,000 people attempted this treacherous journey, and sadly, 1 in 10 died trying. Nevertheless, you persist in your endeavor in hopes that you will reach California before winter sets in. This is the story of how the Oregon-California Trails Association, or OCTA, and Nevada Gold Mines have come together to ensure the preservation of one of the most pristine sections of the trail. John Winter, historian and former president of OCTA, made this preservation possible.
Well, my name is John Winter. I was born in Wilkinsburg, Pennsylvania, just a suburb of Pittsburgh. My father had a brother living in Southern California. So we made a trip in 1950 on Route 66 to California. Went back home, liked it. We made another trip to California. And in 1953, liked it so much that folks moved to California.
John, a resident of Placerville, California, is passionate about preserving the history of the Old West. He is a member of the Oregon-California Trails Association and has spearheaded an effort to protect Gravelly Ford, along with the nearby section of the California Trail. Gravelly Ford, located west of Emigrant Pass, is a crossing of the Humboldt River that was used by hundreds of wagon trains, people on foot, and horseback, as the Gravelly River bottom provided a safe passage when the water level was low enough. John's commitment to preserving the trail has allowed the legacy of the journey to continue to be shared and remembered.
A fellow by the name of Lansford Hastings opened up a route. It left Fort Bridger, followed into the Salt Lake Valley, over the Salt Flats, came to the Ruby Mountains, had to go to the south of the Ruby Mountains, came up through Huntington Valley, and it tied back into the California Trail just east of here by about 15 or 20 miles. So once the immigrants got to this particular point, this was it. This was the main trail.
A typical pioneer outfit of 5 or 6 people included 1 or 2 wagons pulled by a team of 6 to 8 oxen. Against popular belief, almost everyone walked the trail as opposed to riding their animals. When fully loaded, the wagons weighed 2,500 pounds and contained provisions for survival, such as food, water, clothing, and weapons.
A lot of folks felt like that if they could go west, there was opportunity there, there was land there, and if they were willing to work hard. Sometimes you would work really, really hard and back east and not much would come of it because there were classes that were already developing, rich and poor and so forth. Others went west, of course, with a gold rush to get rich quick, which didn't actually happen to very many people.
If you look at the National Park Service on the Oregon Trail, they indicate that the Oregon Trail encompasses approximately 2,000 miles. The California National Historic Trail encompasses about 5,000 miles. The mid-1840s when things really picked up. We were in that era where the term manifest destiny came into play.
The idea of manifest destiny, the notion that all land between the Atlantic and the Pacific was up for grabs, combined with economic hardship on the East Coast, sparked a great migration of people. Inexperienced travelers often hired guides, usually ex-trappers or military men colloquially referred to as mountain men. They offered the necessary skills and wilderness experience to keep them alive on the trail. The American Mountain Men, a contemporary group that strives to recreate the lifestyle of the 1840s, comes close to that era in the 21st century. Larry Walker is a member of that group and has learned the ways of those who lived out west so long ago.
I met some people from the American Mountain Men, and they did things more authentic, I guess you'd say, or more primitive. Everything had to be documented, and I was invited to join, and it took 3 years to meet all the requirements. And so I've been a member of the American Mountain Men since about 2003. But what we do is we go and hunt, fish, trap with only what the men of from 1800 to 1840 would have had. Coldest I've ever been was 6 below, sleeping in a buffalo robe. We learn by doing with what they had.
In the 1840s, the fur trade ended, ushering in a new era of family immigration. Explorers and trappers had to adapt.
At the end of the fur trade era, a lot of men went back to the settlements, went back to Missouri, but the ones that wanted to stay in the mountains started contracting with immigrants to guide them through the mountains or with the military. But the ones that became the trailblazers for the pioneers were just people who wanted to stay in the mountains and had to figure out a way to survive.
Life on a wagon train in the 19th century was a vastly different experience for families than for small groups of hunters. Women were just as hardworking as the men. Pam Walker, Larry's wife, explains the hard work women did both at home and on the trail.
Because they did the cooking, they did the packing, they still had to walk, they still had to travel, they had to carry everything with them. And when the pioneer women came this way, they also did the cooking and the packing, and they still had to walk and to travel. Probably carry some of the children if they're small children. Then they've got to, when you stop for the midday, if you get a chance to stop for midday, you've got to set everything up and prepare another meal. Then you've got to pack everything back up, put it in. And like you say, there's no modern conveniences.
Seeing these figures in accurate clothing against the backdrop of gravelly ford, hunting for sage grouse, antelope, and other wild game, making camp, boiling coffee, and memorializing those who passed away on the trail connects us all to the human element of our past.
This gravesite that I'm sitting in front of is located up out of the plain, dry land, just literally 500 yards maybe from the actual crossing or of the river itself. But it's significantly part of the gravelly ford site.
Job 19:26. And though after my skin worms destroy this body, yet in my flesh shall I see God.
This human connection to our past and the land itself should never be lost.
Well, there's a common theme with most of the diarists and the immigrants. They encountered rocky trail, they encountered dust, they encountered little feed and water.
The miles walked by immigrants and traders were marked in diary entries and letters.
Our journey has been over the same rugged ridges and through deep loam and dust, The country still bears its dreaded aspect, and a wide, extended sterility pervades over the whole face of the country. Augustus Burbank, August 16th, 1849.
Road exceedingly dusty. After leaving the ravine, the road ascends a hill. After this, gradually to the river. In a short distance after entering the bottom of the road, passes close to the bank. D.B. Andrews, July 23, 1852.
Meanest and muddiest, filthiest stream, most cordially, I hate you. Leander v. Loomis, 1850.
Traveled 23 miles, rough, hilly, stony road, and dusty too. Very hard traveling. Encamped on the south side of the river. Poor grass and miserable water. We are out of breadstuffs. There are a great many on the road out of provisions. They are killing off their cattle and jerking the meat. Hard times. Henry Bloom, August 15th, 1850.
At Gravelly Ford, the Indians are very thick. They have killed 2 men today and took their ammunition and horses and left them for the buzzards. Sarah Davis, September 17th, 1850.
When you look at the diaries in the location we are here at Gravelly Ford, most of the immigrants traveled in August. This was the time of the year that they would travel. They reached this particular point.
Gravelly Ford was a hinge point. Water and grass were plentiful and good for the first 100 miles of the Humboldt River until Gravelly Ford. For the next 200 miles, the quality and quantity of water and grass would decline until the river disappeared entirely at the Humboldt Sink. What became the California Trail was already in use for thousands of years by Native Americans. Perspectives from those emigrating and those who have called this land home for millennia will be different.
So one of the things that the westward movement did was that people who were coming west, namely white Americans and some African Americans and some others, had a culture that would clash with the Native Americans who were already here. Completely different worldviews, completely different religious views, and most importantly, a completely different view of the land and the world.
It was difficult for the Native American people. I mean, here comes this onslaught of people over their land. I don't think there were any rules and regulations at that time about what's yours is mine and what's mine is yours and so forth.
My name is Leah Brady, and I am a White Knife Shoshone, and which is part of the Western Shoshone today. We call ourselves Western Shoshone. We've lived in this area for more than 15,000 years. So I'm part of the White Knife band that lived along the Humboldt River. And I've lived here all my life in Elko, and my mother was also born here. And my father was born in Beowawe, which is down by Gravelly Ford. So he grew up in that area. So they had close contact with the immigrants that came through here.
The effects of Europeans on the native populations cannot be overlooked. Beginning with the influx of fur trappers in the early 1800s, the number of white settlers grew exponentially. First encounter of white men was experienced directly by an ancestor of Leah.
It would be my great-great-grandfather. And as he was looking at the river, he kept seeing this dust cloud getting bigger and bigger. So he followed them. And as he was following them, he saw the snakes. And he couldn't figure out what those snakes were. He kept following them. It was this big wooden box that he was seeing that was making the snake trails. When he got close, he was confused because he couldn't understand why these people were traveling and sick. And he had never seen hair on people's faces before. And so he was concerned that they were sick and they were bringing sickness into the area.
The fur trading era of the West was strikingly different than the emigration era. The mountain men had an appreciation for the natives. They respected their way of life and sought to learn from them.
You know, a great deal of them got along with the Native Americans. A high compliment to a mountain man was, "Oh, I mistook you for an Indian," because they adopted a lot of the dress and the survival techniques that they learned from the Indians, and also Plains Indian sign talk and stuff like that, so they could communicate and trade. And many of them spent winters with Indian tribes. They took Indian wives.
This changed by the 1850s, as those heading west on the trail did not have the same relationship with the land or its people.
You know, so when we talk about changes, not only has our food sources, but the environment that we're living in, and then, of course, then we've moved into forced assimilation that we've had to go through. And, you know, there's good and bad to all of it. And, you know, and we can't say that we haven't learned to assimilate as we're going, because we've created another way of doing what we're doing. And that's what we did. And that's how we survived, even when there weren't the non-Indians here. It was a matter of survival.
Our nation's history is a patchwork quilt of perspectives and stories. By listening to the voices of people from a variety of backgrounds, we can better comprehend the past and the present and have a greater sense of where we are headed in the future.
The importance of this site today is that we're in the process of trying to preserve not only the trail, but the historic site here of where the immigrants camped and what have you. If you think about it, at times there could have been 500 to 1,000 covered wagons here and thousands of cattle and so forth in this one spot. But the importance of this site is that we are very close to creating a conservation easement with Nevada Gold Mines that will preserve not only the trail leading down to this site, but 100 meters around this particular site itself. It will become part of the conservation easement. And this is to protect this and preserve it into perpetuity for all of the future generations.
And this is what trails tourism can offer. There are so many diverse stories of people, places, and events that make up our American mosaic. Every generation can find a connection to our national historic trails. A visit to a historical site can be enriching and deeply moving. Here we are looking southwest directly over the California Trail right after sunset. Gravelly Ford is in the middle distance. The immensity of the landscape comes alive in these aerial views. We can clearly see the swales created by thousands of wagons and many thousands of draft animals which passed through here. The trail was truly like an interstate freeway in the 1800s. Conservation of landmarks such as the Gravelly Ford River crossing and the California Trail, along with wildlands that have not been developed or significantly altered from their natural state, is growing exponentially in importance. Sprawling development increasingly threatens once pristine lands, and now, in the 21st century, shifting energy needs must also be taken into account. Wind and solar farms, oil pipelines, and other energy infrastructure are needed for a constantly growing, evolving, and modernizing society.
These are some of the most pristine segments of the California Trail that work down to the river, and they need to be preserved. We have numerous threats to a lot of our trails and so forth, and here's an area that I think we can work to preserve, and I think the landowner is interested in that as well.
Collaborative preservation efforts are essential to ensure future generations can experience the same beauty of natural sites. Gravelly Ford and a large section of the California Trail several miles long are now protected in perpetuity with an easement of 50 meters on each side of the trail. The trail itself and its environs appear much as they did 170 years ago.
Today, you could stand in that same spot and get almost that same view shed. You really have to look hard to see anything other than just what the immigrants saw. Sure, today there's a few farm roads or ranch roads and a couple water troughs and what have you, but it's pretty much what they saw. Now, that said, turn around, look to the northeast, and Interstate 80 is right behind you. And here are the 18-wheelers and the cars at warp speed in a different mode of transportation.
The California Trail, including Gravelly Ford, passes through private land owned and operated by Nevada Gold Mines.
So I'm Chris Jasmine. I'm the manager of biodiversity and rangelands for Nevada Gold Mines. I'm a sixth-generation Nevadan. Family first came to Nevada in about the 1860s.
Chris is very familiar with this remote land and understands the value of preservation when the opportunity arises.
Mitigation projects are really a big part of what Nevada Gold Mines does here in eastern Nevada, whether it be wildlife mitigation, whether it be cultural mitigation, whether it be historic mitigation. When we have the opportunity on these ranches that we operate to preserve something or protect something or enhance something, it really means a lot to us in our business model to make sure that we take those opportunities and capitalize on them. So the first time that I probably observed Gravelly Ford and the trail down through was actually at the unknown Gravesite, and I think that site to me is the most moving of all the stretches that come through the Horseshoe Ranch, just because there's people that had dreams that came out, and those dreams ended, and they ended right here on this portion of the ranch.
The remoteness of Gravelly Ford has kept this part of the trail in pristine condition. John saw the opportunity to work with the Nevada Gold Mines and the Oregon-California Trails Association in 2013 to promote awareness and protection of this area.
The trail had not really been mapped to the standards that OCTA does. They call them MET standards, Mapping Emigrant Trails, where you physically go in and map the trail and you classify the trail.
Founded in 1982, the Oregon-California Trails Association promotes appreciation, understanding, and stewardship of the trails and their stories. They strive to educate the public about 19th century westward expansion, providing opportunities to experience the trails firsthand.
The Oregon-California Trails Association is an amazing organization. There are people who care about preserving historical sites, wagon ruts and trails. Grave sites are very important, and other kinds of historical places.
Yeah, so here on the Horseshoe Ranch is a pretty unique stretch of the trail where the immigrants that came over Immigrant Pass came down through the ranch and then ended up reconnecting with the Humboldt River at a place called Gravelly Ford. Because it is fairly remote, there are portions of that trail that you can still see very plainly, and because of that, it was identified as a pretty important stretch that needed some protection.
And also, I think, is an opportunity for the mining company to show to the people that, look, we do have something that's worth preserving. We're in the business of mining, but we also want to do something to help preserve part of history.
And really, that's how we got going on this project, to look at preserving portions of the California Trail where they cross through our Horseshoe Ranch.
Preserving the river crossing at Gravelly Ford, along with a significant portion of the California Trail, keeps this wild and remote place free from development.
So we have a tendency to want to change history, but it's important to tell the story. And you can tell the story by preserving what is there or putting together the journals and the facts and so forth. But we need to tell the story. The preservation aspect of it is difficult because you have to really pick and choose where you want to draw the line in the sand.
When we preserve and understand our past, when we keep the connection to the land and the people who were there, we are better able to understand who we are. And just as those living long ago, we can rise up to the challenges life has for us and emerge stronger together.
There's so much to learn. They made mistakes. They did incredible things. So we can learn from both. We can learn cooperation. We can learn that we can do hard things. It's possible if you're positive, if you exercise faith, if you have a good belief system, and you hang together as a group, you can do amazing things.
Preserving our national historic trails is essential to safeguarding our nation's fascinating history. To learn more, please visit octa-trails.org. Our past can disappear in the blink of an eye, but together, we could save our wild places and our history.
The previous program was brought to you in part by Nevada Gold Mines. Visit barrick.com. The Oregon-California Trails Association. Visit octa-trails.org. Knowledge Tree Films, a mindfully creative production house. Visit knowledgetreefilms.com.